Trump has always been lower than the historic average. We live in highly polarized times. He's a highly polarized individual. So I think that's less telling.
Okay.
And what's more telling is the decline. It is normal for any administration to lose creds, to lose some people as they make decisions.
Honeymoon ending.
Honeymoon ending, exactly. The historic average over the last 70 years is a 3-point decline.
Okay.
Trump is at 6 points. And so he's outstripping the average. By about twofold or so. What does that mean specifically? We have to wait and see, obviously. But I would characterize it with one word: friction. There's friction around the edges. It doesn't matter what the policy area is, but the administration is bumping up against public opinion.
Including immigration, which jumped off the page for a lot of people and made some waves when you released that poll last week. This is supposed to be the winning issue right now as he grapples with the economy. Tom Homan this morning said most secure border in history. We're hearing reports of mass deportations. Everybody knows what's happening in El Salvador. He says, this is what I ran on. Promises kept, promises delivered. And what did you find?
Well, it is his bailiwick. He won in 2016 on immigration. He mobilized and fortified himself in 2020 and 2024 on immigration. And indeed, it's a signature issue. And if you look at the polling, a vast majority, super majority of Americans agree, yeah, we should deport illegals who are criminals. Okay? But what is happening, actually? They disagree about how it's being done. It's not fair to spirit away someone in the middle of the night. There's a need for due process. So ultimately what we're saying, and once again I go back to my concept of friction, we're seeing a lot of friction relative to this issue, and Americans ultimately saying, I agree in principle with what the administration wants to do, but they're not being fair.
That would also suggest an opportunity to improve perception if the process changed. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say.
The end game is popular, to your point.
Yeah, this doesn't mean he can't improve again.
Right.
That is, he gains back those 3 additional decline points of decline, let's say. Yes, that's true. So if they modify the way they go about operationalizing policy, indeed, maybe Americans or some Americans go, okay, so like they've changed their tack a bit. They're more fundamentally fair when they're dealing with illegal immigrants. I can get behind them.
Yeah.
But right now, that's not happening.
Economy is another big one and helped to bring Donald Trump back to the White House. It had so much to do with prices and inflation. And now we're watching prices in many cases rise. We're seeing consumers anticipate further increases. How much of this has to do with tariffs versus everything else?
Well, there's a general sort of noise quotient.
Yeah.
and we've done a lot of focus groups and talked to Americans, talked to consumers, and this generalized sort of uncertainty is not good, right? But really what's driving the dissatisfaction is the anticipation, as you said, of tariffs and more specifically inflation. You already have households going, you know what? I might not travel in the summer with my family. Right. Maybe I should buy a few more rolls of toilet paper just to kind of stock up before things get really bad. And so you already have anticipatory behavior in regards to tariffs and inflation.
I thought we were supposed to be buying wine. Are we buying toilet paper again? That's actually something that you know a lot about going back to the pandemic, the sort of human behavior that kicks in when you see something coming. But that sounds entirely emotional, doesn't it? If prices aren't actually rising and we're making judgments on leadership based on what we think is going to happen, is that a new realm? How do you measure that?
Well, I mean, we do it. We measure it by past behaviors, right?
Okay.
But yeah, we're in a realm, we're in a moment now that's unprecedented in some ways. Like, how do you model that behavior? It's very rare, especially in the American context, to have a leader. The leader of the nation making decisions that potentially will affect directly the economy in the near future.
Yeah.